Scarlett Johansson once shared an eerie experience that she rarely talks about anymore. It all happened one night when she stayed at a luxurious but strangely unsettling hotel while filming in a remote location. The hotel had an old-world charm, with dimly lit hallways and vintage decor, but something about it felt off. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. Maybe the long days of shooting were playing tricks on her mind. But as the night unfolded, things took a chilling turn. What started as a simple stay in a grand hotel soon turned into one of the most terrifying nights of her life. Little did she know, something was lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. By the way, if you're new here and want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You don't want to miss what happens next. Scarlett arrived at the hotel just as the sun was setting, casting long shadows over the building's grand yet slightly ominous exterior. It was an old hotel, tucked away in a quiet, remote area far from the bustling city. The moment she stepped out of the car, she felt an odd chill in the air, though it wasn't particularly cold outside. She brushed it off, thinking it was just exhaustion from the long day of shooting. As she entered the lobby, the first thing she noticed was how unusually quiet it was. The only sound was the soft creaking of the floor beneath her feet and the occasional distant echo of a door closing somewhere down the hall. The hotel staff greeted her politely, but their smiles felt forced, almost as if they knew something she didn't. The decor was grand but old. Heavy velvet curtains, antique furniture, and dim lighting that made everything feel slightly out of focus. Despite its beauty, the place had a strange energy that Scarlett couldn't quite put her finger on. She made her way to her room, the long corridors lined with paintings of unfamiliar faces staring blankly at her as she passed. Her footsteps echoed loudly, amplifying the eerie silence. When she finally reached her door, she hesitated for a moment before turning the key, a feeling of unease settling in the pit of her stomach. Something about this place didn't feel right, but she convinced herself it was all in her head. Little did she know, the night was just beginning. As Scarlett settled into her room, she tried to relax, but the unsettling vibe of the hotel seemed to cling to her. The room was spacious, elegantly decorated with vintage furniture, but there was something about it that felt off. The air felt heavy, almost stifling, and despite the silence, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. Still, she pushed aside the creeping unease, blaming her tiredness for the strange thoughts. It wasn't long before the first odd thing happened. As she sat by the window, scrolling through her phone, she heard soft footsteps outside her door. She paused, listening intently, but the hallway should have been empty at that time of night. The footsteps stopped, and when she got up to check, there was no one there. She brushed it off, assuming it must have been another guest or hotel staff passing by. A few hours later, as she lay in bed trying to fall asleep, the lights began to flicker. At first, she thought it was a power issue, but when she sat up, they stopped. The room was once again plunged into a deep, unsettling silence. Scarlett stared at the ceiling, her heart beating a little faster, wondering if she was imagining things. Then came the whispers. Faint, barely audible, but definitely there. Murmurs that seemed to be coming from the hallway or possibly the adjacent room. They were so soft that she couldn't make out any words, but they sounded like they were right outside her door. Scarlett sat up in bed, straining to hear, her heart racing now. She wanted to call the front desk, but something stopped her. She felt like somehow it wouldn't help. In the dead of night, Scarlett jolted awake. The room was completely silent, except for a faint dripping sound that seemed to be coming from the bathroom. She lay still for a moment, trying to shake off the grogginess, but the dripping sound grew louder, more insistent. It was strange. She hadn't used the sink before going to bed. Cautiously, she got up and walked to the bathroom. As she flicked on the light, she froze. The faucet was running, full blast, even though she was certain she hadn't touched it. Her pulse quickened. She stepped forward, reaching out to turn it off, when she noticed something even more chilling. The mirror was fogged up, and through the mist, faint handprints appeared, as if someone had pressed their palms against the glass. Scarlett's breath caught in her throat. She was alone in the room, and no one else had been inside. Slowly, she wiped the mirror with her hand, trying to calm herself. But as the steam cleared, she felt her stomach drop. There, behind her reflection, a shadowy figure stood in the corner of the room, motionless. She spun around, her heart pounding, but the figure was gone. The room was empty, yet the feeling of being watched was overwhelming. Scarlett's hands trembled as she backed out of the bathroom, shutting the door behind her. She crawled back into bed, pulling the covers up to her chin, but sleep was the last thing on her mind. The reality of the situation was sinking in. Something was very wrong in this hotel, and she wasn't alone. Scarlett lay in bed, wide awake, her mind racing. She kept telling herself it was all in her head, just her imagination playing tricks on her. But deep down, she knew something wasn't right. The room felt colder now, and the air seemed to hum with an unsettling energy. She tried to calm her breathing, but a strange sound cut through the silence. It was a soft creak, like someone stepping lightly on the wooden floor. Scarlett's heart skipped a beat. Slowly, she turned her head toward the foot of the bed, and her blood ran cold. There, standing in the dim light, was a figure. A shadowy silhouette, barely visible in the darkness. It wasn't human, at least not anymore. Its form was vague, flickering, like a distortion in the air, and yet she could feel its presence, heavy and oppressive. Scarlett was paralyzed, her body refusing to move, her voice caught in her throat. The figure didn't approach, didn't speak, but she could feel its gaze locked onto her. The room seemed to darken, as if the air itself had thickened. Scarlett tried to scream, but no sound came out. She watched, helpless, as the figure slowly raised its hand, pointing directly at her. Then, in a voice that was barely a whisper, it spoke. The words were faint, distorted, but unmistakable. "Leave, or you'll never escape." And just like that, the figure vanished, dissolving into the shadows as if it had never been there. Scarlett remained frozen, unable to comprehend what had just happened. Her heart pounded in her chest, and her body finally responded as she bolted upright, gasping for air. She knew she had to get out of that room, out of that hotel, before it was too late. The next morning, Scarlett barely slept a wink. Her eyes were bloodshot from exhaustion, and her mind still raced with the terrifying encounter. She quickly packed her things, eager to leave the hotel as soon as possible. The morning light did little to calm her nerves. In fact, it made the whole place seem even more unsettling in the daylight. As she made her way downstairs, the staff greeted her with polite smiles, but something about their expressions seemed different now, almost knowing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were aware of what had happened to her, like they had seen this before. At the front desk, she hesitated for a moment before asking the receptionist if she could leave early. To her surprise, the receptionist nodded without question and said, "I understand, Miss Johansson. It's not the first time someone's had an experience here." The nonchalant way she said it made Scarlett's skin crawl. As she walked out of the hotel, she couldn't help but glance back, feeling the weight of its gaze on her. It was as if the hotel itself was watching her leave, waiting for its next victim. As Scarlett drove away, she couldn't help but reflect on that night, the terror she had felt, the ghostly presence that had haunted her every step. She never spoke about it again, but it remained one of the most chilling experiences of her life. To this day, she's never returned to that hotel, and she never will. Was it all in her mind, or was there something more sinister at play? Some mysteries, it seems, are better left unsolved.